afternoon, and good day to you. This is Brandon Tilt here, and you're tuned into Feather of Light, podcast where I like to talk about things related to counseling or mental health or philosophy, and sometimes just nerd out. But today, I don't know, I feel kind of like it's going to be a free flow. I'm going to try to keep it brief. Definitely not going to go into near the level of depth I did with my neuroscience, neuropsychology one. So, jumping right on in. Today I'd like to maybe just explore the topic of expression a little bit more broadly, beginning with just recognizing the healing potential of expression, whether it's movement and going to ecstatic dance events or just making time for authentic movement throughout our day, or whether it's finding a way to allow our breath to authentically express what our body needs or what our body wants to do. I feel like there's a very nuanced level of expression that we overlook through the way we breathe. I was noticing a couple of my colleagues having a heated intellectual discussion about, some of the ways to breathe that helps accommodate the body or helps work with, let's just say, certain anatomies of the rib cage and the diaphragm and stuff I don't know about. But in all honesty, it's just somatic intelligence and recognizing that this expression is your body teaching you something. And I think that's such a profound aspect of that. And, poetry for me has been something I've really looked to over the years to speak and embody this type of expression that I would say comes from, debatably another dimension. And it kind of feels weird to put it into words. I was listening to Matthias De Stefano, and, if you go this deep or choose not to, that's totally up to you. But he talks about how the stuff that is essentially channeling from the fifth dimension, right? That's how he calls it, how he refers to it, and trying to put it into words in this 3D experience we're in. It's kind of like you're just confusing yourself, and you might be actually triggering a lot of unnecessary emotions that you don't really have the ability to reference, or you don't know why they're coming up. So just recognizing that expression, whether it's just writing something down, drawing something, allowing it to be felt in the body, it might actually be the most, relevant way to quote unquote vocalize or express something versus trying to figure out the words or the thoughts or whatever might actually just be counter to the message that you're receiving, the download you're receiving. So yeah, but poetry, it's been one of those things for me that's helped me recognize what's going on in the unconscious mind, and really gives me a platform for just getting it all out, and maybe on some level trying to tap the well, if that makes sense. Like I'm trying to see what's at the bottom there, and if there is something willing to surface, I'll give it that space. But for those who are aware what free association is this thing that Sigmund Freud came up with, right? He used it in psychoanalysis, where you would basically just start talking. And I don't have the exact process down. I don't know how to, walk someone through it in the whole psychodynamic method, but from my understanding, it's just talking, allowing someone to talk and keep on talking and keep on talking. You don't interrupt them. You don't, prompt them to go into certain places. You basically just try to get them to continue to freely express. And then the association, I believe, comes in terms of, I think they ask them what they associate to that thing. So there is a little bit of their own personal interpretations coming in, but the analyst or therapist wouldn't do any of that, right? They're simply just a container for a person to freely express. And then they would help assist them and facilitate further association that's done through their lens. So anyway, I've been free writing in the sort of same, to the same effect as a free association. I've just been writing what comes to mind, and instead of associating it with anything, those exact words, I would take the significant words. And as a part of a art therapy exercise, I was assigned to write a poem with those same words. So it's interesting what happens when you give yourself the space to free express versus having some kind of intentional expression. And, you want to paint a thing and you want to do this, or you want to write a poem about something. It's like, well, no, just doing it from a place of there is no expectation. There is no real right or wrong way to do it. You just give yourself the space and you just go. You wind yourself up and you let yourself spin. And yeah, it's been interesting realizing what's under the surface that I'm just not willing to consciously sit with. And when I do sit with it, and when I do reread these poems, I feel like there's tremendous grief or very intense experiences of trying to grapple with darkness or, spiritual stuff that I thought I sort of on some level had integrated. But, let's just say drinking ayahuasca, you're integrating that for a long time. And a lot of the stuff that you felt when you were in ceremony, or maybe even the conclusions you thought you could have reached afterward, let's just say, who knows whether you reached a conclusion, it kind of just goes unprocessed or half processed. And then it kind of just gets bottled down, right? It gets bottled up. It gets pushed down. It's kind of just laying dormant. And I would say when you write a poem in the way that I expressed with 3-3 association, when you paint a painting with no real, let's just say, intention, maybe there's a way it just kind of brings up energy and it can help you express something that doesn't need to be said in words. So to that effect, I feel like this is a great tangent here. Art as integration. This is something I've been really getting curious of because I've been revisiting some of my ayahuasca ceremony emotions or like little kind of themes that I originally visited while with the medicine about a year ago. And I'm painting to help allow that to surface in a safe way, but it's also bringing up a lot, activating a lot. It's triggering a lot in the body post-session, and I'm doing my best to sit with it. I'm doing it with an art therapist to help me facilitate it. We just finished our last session until after the holiday, but I did 4 sessions with her. It was really amazing. And yeah, just realizing now I'm going on to create this integration container that I've been really preparing for over a year, longer probably. And I'm going to be doing that with the assistance, with the co-facilitation of an art therapist, and her and I are going to dive in and create that container. And I wrote the guided meditation for it, and I started looking at it, and I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, there's so much that can come up here. There's so much that can be akin to a deep process. And I almost just want to offer that if we can express ourselves fully, consistently enough in safe spaces, right? Like that's the big piece, is in a safe space. Then maybe going into an integration space and something coming up from ceremony doesn't feel as overwhelming because you've prepared yourself, maybe emotionally or physically. Maybe you have tools that help you regulate during the integration space, during the art process, and maybe a little bit after, right? And maybe you have resources, like emotional resources that go beyond strictly just the facilitation of that group. Like I would say having a counselor, having a coach, having a close friend, maybe a family member, someone that you can just debrief with and will really fully hear you and receive you and understands. Isn't just like, what the hell you mean you drank ayahuasca? they're there with you in it, and they understand, and maybe they've done it themselves, and they could just receive you and fully witness you. And it's not like they're judging or interpreting it either. So yeah, I guess just to wrap this up, art as therapy in itself, it's called art as wellness. I was told this distinction by my art therapist. There's art as wellness, right? Where you're just painting for sake of itself. The painting is the healing. It's the therapy. You don't have to go into it and try to figure it out, and you're not using a prompt or anything, right? It's just you're painting, and the painting process, putting the paint on the canvas, that is the healing. Now, art as therapy is a very different process. And just to advocate a little bit here. It can get really deep really fast. Someone brings in a prompt that pulls you right into a deep re-traumatization kind of experience, like you're reliving the trauma in the body. Just being aware that can be really hard on the nervous system. That can be destabilizing. So if the person has to go on to, say, work right after that, they're going to be out of it. They're going to be in a trauma response, right? So recognizing, do they have the space? Do you make the space to go on to integrate or do lots of self-care after you do this art therapy prompt, right? After you engage with this reliving of this experience in the body. So just setting yourself up for I'd say a valuable and impactful experience, but also creating that safety so that you're not feeling dysregulated throughout the day and you're not feeling just, I don't know, like going in was more painful than staying out. Like that's kind of something I feel like sometimes we experience if we go a little bit too deep. But there's this thing called titration. And titration, it's often a term used in somatic therapy. It's where you go just a little bit. You just dip a toe, right? You go just deep enough to where you're re-experiencing some of these emotions and some of the experience in the body. And then you're finding your edge, right? You're starting to play with, how does my body respond and where can I kind of ground that off or create some degree of, regulation? Like you're trying to find where your edge exists and not jump off it, and notice that you can create that safety and that stability, and then maybe return to it in a little bit once you're feeling more in your body, once you're feeling more present and more grounded. I would say in parts work, it's once you've introduced more self energy, you can go back and talk with the parts or go and feel into the emotion or feel into the body's experience. Once you've acquired this compassion and this curiosity and this love and this turning towards those experiences versus feeling like you need to pull away, or you've already sort of pulled away in some kind of shape or form. I think a last little thing here, I said I was finishing off, but something else came up, so I don't think it was I was done yet, but I'm looking at this book called The Creative Connection. I'm not going to reference this too much, but it's a text for expressive art therapy by Natalie Rogers. And it talks about the conditions that foster creativity. And I think this aligns with what I just mentioned earlier around safety. So it talks about how it really matters that you're creating safe and trusting environments. Right, whatever that means to you and whatever that means to your, let's just say your client, if you're working with clients or whatever. So it's like, yeah, they're talking about there's this relationship that needs to be built first. And I think that makes perfect sense. It's like, if you're in a space where there's a facilitator and you don't have the ability to create that relationship, how are you, in a way, like, how can you deeply trust them? How can you deeply feel safe? Yes, you can feel on a surface level trustworthy and safe if that's kind of how you go about things. But when you're in your lowest of your low, or your deepest, hardest, most sharpest protector parts are online, or you're reliving a traumatic experience that was literally like the hardest thing you ever experienced, and it's kind of like you don't fully trust the person that's facilitating that, it's like, well, not only will you not go into that experience like more deeply, it can be very hard to actually want to embody this level of expression that I'm referring to, that I feel helps you move through it. So, I mean, depends what you're doing, right? Maybe if you're not there to work through it, that's okay. But I would say if you can alchemize the pain and the suffering and the grief into some kind of a creative expression, some kind of joy, some kind of playfulness, right? That is so empowering. And I would say it requires that safety to be able to lean into that creativity, to be able to really empower these parts of you that feel disempowered. So yeah, having a safe space, creating that safe space for yourself. If you're just painting on your own and you want to try out an art therapy prompt, right? Maybe you're a little bold and you feel like you can create that safety for yourself. I think many people can, but just recognizing like, yeah, maybe that looks like having a quiet space, right? Maybe it looks like having less disruptions. Maybe the people in your environment, you trust them and know them, and they're not going to come in and kind of give you a hard time while you're painting or afterward or something. It's not a conflict just waiting on the other end of your process. And maybe just the people are safe humans, right? Like they regulate their nervous systems, they do their inner work. They're just people that you could trust if you had to. Not that you need to lean into them for support, but if you had to, you could. And then, of course, your physical environment. This is just like set and setting if it were a psychedelic trip, right? Just recognizing like, what's the flow of the energy in your space? Do you clear your space? Do you smudge it or burn some kind of, copal or palo santo? Do you create that safety within the energy of the container where you're creating and where you're expressing and where you're going deep into those emotions? And then, of course, lastly, the integration afterward, even if it's just for that day or maybe that week, where you're just a little bit more gentle with yourself. You've, really created a lot of self-care. It's kind of like interwoven into your routine. Maybe your workflow isn't as intense for the couple days that follow a deep art therapy process. So like, yeah, what are you doing to create that safety for yourself? And then just recognizing that, yeah, if you're in a space with other people, how are they creating that additional safety? How are they, on some level, helping support the level of safety that's required in the container? And then maybe on some level, helping just give you a little bit that you can take with you for the integration process. So I hope this has been a helpful exploration of expression. As there's various forms of it, as I've spoken of poetry, I've spoken to authentic movement, ecstatic dance. I didn't really get into those too much, but then very briefly looking at how breath and the body responds to breath and how it just kind of teaches us and shows us and expresses. And then, of course, painting and art therapy and poetry. These are forms of expression that aren't about talking, aren't about going to therapy, aren't about writing down our thoughts. They're just about a deeper, more, I'd say, authentic form of expression that just, it's beautiful. It's human. Yeah. So I appreciate you joining me today for this brief podcast episode. Hope you have a great rest of your day. If you're feeling called, maybe leave me 5 stars. And yeah, take care. Have a great afternoon. Bye now. And if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, please reach out over Instagram, Facebook, or through my email, featheroflightcounseling@outlook.com. I have available slots for counseling. Additionally, I have parts workshops that I'm running each week. So Saturdays at 10 a.m. we'll be meeting this week and each week following, where we can bring in discussions around parts. You can share about things that you're noticing about your parts, and I will offer some education around working with your parts. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Take care. Bye.